So this is your lecture on the Louisiana Purchase. I made that subtitle for you there. That awkward moment when you have to go back on what you've been saying all along because of a great deal. That applies to the president at this point, which, as you remember from last section, elected in 1800 was Thomas Jefferson. So I want you to remember this subtitle, and we'll return to it later. So what I want you to be able to do by the end of this, these come straight out of your curriculum, you're going to be able to explain some key events of Thomas Jefferson's presidency. You're going to be able to examine the effects of Haiti's revolution on the U.S. acquisition of Louisiana. This one is the most important for this section especially. And this is a really fancy way, I don't know how much there is to examine or explain. Thanks to the revolution, we were able to acquire Louisiana. And I'll explain that in a little more detail in a later slide. And then there's always this catch-all objective. In every single section, you'll see that they want you to be able to understand the influence of certain individuals. And at the end, we'll look at some of the individuals who were crucial to the actual exploration of that Louisiana territory. So don't forget the situation as it stood in 1800. Here we have the United States controlled states and territories. Now, this map is especially created so that you can keep an eye on the development of free states and slave states, because as you know, that's going to become really important later. But we've got our free states, our slave states. Don't forget that Florida is at this time still controlled by Spain. And then we have our territories. So recall that when we started moving westward, as part of the land ordinances and Northwest ordinances, a certain number of settlers would be required, and then it would be considered a territory, and they would establish certain governments. They would set aside, as you recall, 1 acre for public schooling. These are ultimately going to, once they reach capacity or have this required number of settlers, they will also become states. Northwest Territory is also, you know, where we're having a number of conflicts with Native Americans who unsurprisingly don't want to just give up their lands, even when the federal government tries to force them to do so. You should remember General Anthony Wayne and the Battle of Fallen Timbers as an important American victory after a series of American losses because they had underestimated those Native Americans. Now we're talking about Louisiana, which you think of as this, but at this time is actually a huge area or a colony, and it's a colony of Spain. It was named after King Louis, if you notice that. The Spanish and the French at this time were working together. Spain became an ally of France, and as you recall, France is almost for the entirety of this time period at war with Great Britain. We also, please remember from last chapter, fought a recent quasi or undeclared war with France over the XYZ affair and their perceived disrespect. But this is the situation as it stands. Spain controls a lot of land here. Now, one of the biggest conflicts that we encountered as we started expanding westward into this territory that we gained after the American Revolution was over the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is crucial to these settlers out in the West because and it is controlled by the Spanish still. Recall that the Spanish were accommodating and allowed us to use the Mississippi River and allowed us to have safe passage in New Orleans during the war. This is crucial to those Westerners. They're using it to transport their goods, their farming products, their other raw materials. The reason especially that they need the Mississippi River is because there aren't a lot of roads being built in this area. Consider that roads are typically built by local governments, and there's not a lot of government here. It's still sort of a wild, wild west as people are moving out there. Now, in 1795, a really important thing happens. The United States negotiates, Charles Pinckney negotiates what they call the Pinckney Treaty with Spain, which guarantees shipping rights and rights to dock in New Orleans and store goods there until they travel out. Now, something alarming happens in 1801 after a period of relative peace out there. We find out in 1801 that Spain has secretly decided to give both New Orleans, that important port city, and the entire Louisiana territory to their ally of France. Now, they may be okay with that, but this is alarming to Thomas Jefferson for several reasons. Now, you may recall that the Jefferson's Republicans supported France. They would prefer to have supported France in this war than Great Britain. But this is alarming because Napoleon Bonaparte, the leader of France, has already established that his goal is to take over as much of Europe as possible. And there's a very real fear that this is an attempt by France to gain a huge foothold in North America and perhaps to block United States expansion westward. And Jefferson, as a true farmer and an agrarian man, believes that, remember, his Republicans believed that farmers and agriculture were the center of America. So this idea that the French may move in here and block our westward expansion was very alarming to them. Even worse, a year later in 1802, the still Spanish governor decides to completely withdraw the shipping rights that had been guaranteed in the Pinckney Treaty. Now, you may wonder why there's still a Spanish governor when I just told you that Spain had given New Orleans and Louisiana Territory to France. The answer to that is that Spain had agreed to continue administering and running the local government of this until the French could arrive and set up shop. Now, in the meantime, Thomas Jefferson decides that the best thing he can do is attempt to buy New Orleans. And he originally makes a very lowball offer. He offers $2 million for New Orleans, and his offer is rejected. Then comes the Haitian Revolution. This man right here is an extremely important figure in Haitian history. His name is Toussaint Louverture. My French accent game is on point, better than my British accent. That is Toussaint Louverture, and he leads the independence movement in Haiti. Haiti was up to that point controlled as a colony by France, and inspired by both the American Revolution, which then inspired the French Revolution. Haiti and the Haitian people decide that they're going to win their independence from France, and thanks to him, they are successful. Now, because of this, the situation has changed from Thomas Jefferson's initial offer, of $2 million. The situation changes. France now has no North American base, whereas before they had Haiti, they had a powerful base from which to fight. They now have no North American base, and they're finding themselves in need of more and more money to fight Great Britain. Please recall that at this time, for nearly the entire of this era, France and Great Britain are at war. So France is finding itself in a cash crunch in need of money to fight their war. While as well, they have lost what was a very valuable North American base and source of raw materials for them. So when Thomas Jefferson the next time sends his envoy, or his person speaking on behalf of him, James Monroe, a personal friend, when he sends him to France to negotiate another deal, he finds that Napoleon is much more open to negotiation. Indeed, France under Napoleon decides to sell New Orleans, the port city, and the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million, which seems like a lot, but is equivalent to about 4 cents per acre. This is a huge territory that in effect doubles the size of the United States. So with that great deal struck between Monroe and still Talleyrand is the French minister, with that great deal struck, now all Jefferson has to do is get this deal approved, and he finds himself in a rather personal political dilemma. You should recall that Thomas Jefferson and his Republicans wanted a comparatively weaker federal government, and when it came to the issue of the national bank, they had a very strong opinion. They said, nowhere in the Constitution does it give you permission to establish a national bank. They had a very strict interpretation of the Constitution, which is a problem, because now the same argument could be made that the Constitution, nowhere in it does it give explicit permission for the president to buy land. So Thomas Jefferson does what any farmer would do when faced with a hugely fertile and wonderful farmland for being sold to him for literally pennies per acre. He decided to change his point of view, and now he's going to adopt a loose interpretation of the Constitution. While the Constitution doesn't explicitly give him the right to buy land, it does give him the right to create treaties. The president's job is to make treaties, and the Senate's job is to approve them. So he decides he's going to loosely interpret this as a treaty. The Senate is all too happy to approve this, excited about the amount of land that they're gaining. And the Louisiana Purchase the Louisiana Territory becomes a part of the United States, and again, doubles its size. Now, I want to recap, because I need you to remember from section 1 that by and large, Thomas Jefferson has so far been all about shrinking. He wants a smaller government that doesn't interfere with the rights of the states. He wants a smaller military. He doesn't want to spend as much money. He doesn't want to have to collect as many taxes. He's going to repeal the whiskey tax, repeal all the federal taxes except for the tariff, and that the smaller federal government is going to live off of the tariff revenue. So while his goal has been to largely shrink everything domestically, he's going to double the physical size of the country. And in doing that, he is going to have to become a much more looser interpreter. Now, to that objective that deals with those important people, these are some that you've heard of and some we'll work more with in class, but you need to be familiar with Lewis and Clark. Those were two Army officers who were sent to explore the northwest area of this Louisiana Purchase. They're going to depart from St. Louis, and this, you can see map on the left, is going to trace their trip all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They're the ones who are going to encounter Sacagawea. Sacagawea is a Shoshone Native American woman who was the wife of a French-Canadian member of their group, and she's going to serve as their guide and their translator as they explore this really uncharted territory. Another important part of this exploratory mission is going to be a man named Zebulon Pike. And on the right side, you'll see Zebulon Pike's route. He is also going to depart from St. Louis, but he's going to attempt to explore that southern part of it. Now, he's going to start off safe. He's going to start off in an area that is solidly part of this Louisiana Purchase. He's going to get all the way to the Rocky Mountains in his attempt to cross the Rocky Mountains and get to the Pacific Ocean, but he's going to be stopped there. And in his attempt to get back to where he started, he's going to veer off into Spanish territory. This is not going to be something that the Spanish appreciate. They are perhaps reasonably concerned that he is in a way spying for the Americans, or that his purpose is to look at what land is there. And there's going to be a real fear amongst the Spanish that the Americans are interested in taking over their territory. And to be fair, they're not wrong. When he comes back and is telling about this wonderful and fertile land here, the Americans are going to listen up and be interested. A couple of important effects of this exploratory era: we're going to find a direct route to the Pacific Ocean. Lewis and Clark are going to come back with a lot of information about the plants, the animals, the landforms, and especially important, the Native American tribes. That was a big part of why Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark on this exploration. And it's just going to increase general excitement about this, because this is, if you don't remember, this is the Great Plains. This is the area of the most fertile farmland, the area that's going to become America's breadbasket. So this is going only to lead to more and more Western movement and Western settlement. Those are the basics of the Louisiana Purchase, and in class we'll continue to explore that, and we'll take a look at some of the primary sources. See you then.